We conclude today the 10th letter. We are speaking about an infinite, limitless form of kindness. Um, and that was the concept of tshuva, that is expressed, penitence, that is expressed by giving in a limitless way. Limitless giving means beyond obligation. That's the basic idea. Being there for another beyond what you're obliged. So when it comes to tzedakah, charity, you're obliged maximum 20%. Being there for another can express itself, their needs. Totally what their needs are. Now, what does that mean exactly? That's already a different story, and how to. Well, actually, I'll tell a story later, maybe to express that. Now we return to what we quoted originally. Chazdei Hashem ki lo tamnu. The kindnesses of God have surely not ended. This is Jeremiah the prophet speaking by the time of the destruction of the first holy temple, about 2,500 years ago. So he says that in the midst of all of this, the kindness of God has surely not ended. Now, we asked a question that for those who are familiar with Hebrew, so the word tamnu is a we. It's first person plural. Seemingly that God's kindnesses have not ended should be the Hebrew word tamu, which would be third person plural. So tamnu means, has a double meaning to it as a result. It means that we are not complete. We are not tamim, complete. That's what it means. So now let's put that together over here. Chazdei Hashem, kindnesses of God, is actually a name of God. His unlimited giving. It's a name. As the verse says, actually in Tehillim, in Psalms, Chazdei Hashem me'olam ve'ad olam. God's chesed is everlasting. Now, the Jewish people, actually one of the signs that it says in the Talmud of the Jewish people is being compassionate and practicing kindly deeds. Nevertheless, these practices of kindly deeds are limited because our compassion is limited. God, though, is unlimited. He's Ein Sof. He's limitless. So not only is God limitless, but his attribute of kindness, is limitless. As we say in David, and also Jeremiah says, Ki lo ycholu rachamav, his mercies never cease. So, what the prophet is saying, that the Jewish people need to be like God. God's kindnesses are, and his compassion are without end. Likewise, we need to act in a similar way as God's kindnesses. Ours also has to be everlasting, never-ending, the kindness, and without boundaries, boundless kindness. And this is why Jeremiah is saying this at the particular time. The tie-in now. What is the tie-in? The tie-in is that he's speaking about a time of destruction. Destruction of the first holy temple, Jewish people going into exile, because of our sins, because of our lacking, because we are not complete. That's the tamnu, that we are not complete. And because we are not complete, because of the destruction, Certainly God's kindnesses, sorry, even we are going into exile, we have sinned. Nonetheless, God's kindnesses have not ended. They are without bounds. In other words, God's kindnesses are without bound. So for us to get that divine light of God, his endless, boundless kindness, is when we are now conducting ourselves in a similar manner. Because we're not perfect, right? We're not the righteous. We're destruction of the Holy Temple because of the sins. Jewish people going into exile. So now to get God's infinite kindness, we need to express it through our infinite kindness too. And as we explained yesterday, right, I briefly said, that means giving beyond what you're obliged. So in giving money, it means beyond 20%. In being there for another, beyond what you are obliged. This is what we need to do. So this is what the prophet is coming to tell us. So we need to practice unbounded kindness because we're not in a state of being, we're imperfect. So in order to, again, be able to elicit God's infinite kindness and compassion, which helps to rectify, as we explained yesterday, our misdeeds, our blemishes, then this is what we need to do. And with this, now we can understand why our sages say that Israel, the Jewish people, will only be redeemed through tzedakah, through charity. What is this means? Charity, that you're giving beyond what you're legally bound to, beyond what you're obliged to. That kind of charity. Again, we're obliged minimum 10%, maximum 20% in actual monies and in and being there for another beyond the call of duty, so to speak. And then he quotes from the Talmud. The Talmud says, Ein ben David bo, Mashiach, the son of David, will not come until the pocket will be empty of even the smallest coin. So the simple meaning is, the one way of learning is just, I'm sorry, that even when the pocket is empty, you'll still give. Otherwise, the pocket is empty, you've got nothing what to give, and you're still giving, and you're still kind, and you're still charitable, and you still find a way to give. That's what the meaning over here. And with that, it concludes the chapter, the letter rather. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's appreciate this idea over here. So again, the idea that when we are down and out, destruction for the Jewish people. Jeremiah the prophet during the times of the first temple rather, 2,500 years ago. And what is he telling the Jewish people? Chazdei Hashem ki lo yitamnu. God's kindnesses, his everlasting kindnesses, his eternal and limitless, boundless giving has not ended. Even though we're not pure, we're not righteous, we can still gain access to it when we act the way God acts. So in other words, to do what you're obliged to do is not being truly godly. It's fulfilling, the mandate of law. Truly godly is rising above and transcending. Even when you don't have, you find a way to give. Is the bottom line here. So there's a beautiful story. There's a beautiful book that I would suggest everybody, if they can get it, called Samarkand. It's a place in the former Soviet Union, written by Hillel Zaltzman. Um, is growing up in Samarkand during the war, after the war, and left in the, I think, early 70s. Um, in any case, he tells a story about his father. This is during the war, maybe right after the war, and he's been in Samarkand. Is not where they were originally from, but during the war, it was a safer place to be. It was more distant. It's in Georgia. It's distant from, most of the Soviet Union and the communists. And Passover was coming. So he went. They didn't have. So he borrowed money. He borrowed 3,000 ruble. I'm not certain what that equivalent would be, but I've heard today. But it was something that would be, sufficient to make for a family a Passover. Definitely would be sufficient. And he borrowed the money. On the way home, he met um, another Jew, a religious Jew who came from Poland. So because it was the war, many people ran from Poland into Russia to save themselves from the Nazis. Yimach Shema. And he met him, and he was new in town. More or less people knew each other there. And he sees a new, fellow Jew in town, and he's speaking to him, tells him that they just came and they're looking to make Pesach, and he's there with a daughter and a son, if I recall, and his wife, and they don't know anybody and they don't have any means. Is there any? Can you help? And help in any way? Any suggestions? So he thinks to himself, "Wow, what divine providence! I just got 3,000 rubles." What did he do? He gave him the 3,000 rubles without saying, anything to him. He borrowed it, this or that. He just gave it to him. He came home after a few days. His wife wanted to start making Pesach. Says, "Do you have any of the money that you borrowed?" Yeah, he started hemming and hawing. And then finally it came out. His wife was flabbergasted. Why? Not that he gave. Why'd you give the whole thing? Why don't you give them half and leave half for us? Right? And he says, "Well, they're new in town. They don't know anybody. They're not going to be able to get the funds. I know. Listen. We know everybody knows us here and trusts us, and I'll be able to get more funds. Don't worry about it." He did, and whatever. Anyway, what's the point over here? I mean, this is like beyond me, I must say. Like, I just, we're talking about, he borrowed money. It's not like he even had the money and he was giving his money. He borrowed the money that he has to give back, and he gives it all away. To me, this is what it means over here in the Talmud. It says Mashiach will come empty of the pocket. You have nothing. So could you imagine, you have your last $20 bill on you or $50 bill on you, and you give it to tzedakah, and you have an empty pocket, and you give it happily. He gave it happily. And by the way, his wife was also incredible. She didn't say, like, "Why don't you give him 10%? Why don't you give him, okay, give him 20%? No. Why don't you give him half and we'll take half? Okay, so we'll have less. But at least we'll have something." Right? So she was also like, beyond the obligation. Did this person have an obligation from borrowed money to give such an amount? No. But this is what it means: limitless giving, beyond obligation, beyond what? The person who did it, by the way, just um, some of you might even know some of the Zaltzmans from Toronto. The one who did it, it's his grandfather, Rabbi Zaltzman in Toronto. It's his grandfather, Rabbi Avram. Who the story is about. Any case, for me, this just brings out unbelievable uh, kindness. And it's not like he felt, ha, look what I did today, Mr. Special. Actually, he was afraid to tell his wife. But, no, it was, he felt whatever. Like, he's just giving beyond. Yeah. So that story always exemplifies for me what it means. Mashiach is going to come when you have an empty pocket. And even with the empty pocket, you give. So the truth is, even they had 3,000 ruble, in a sense it was an empty pocket because it wasn't his money. He had to pay it back. Yeah. So that point, and again, the point that when we are in a state of lacking, so acting in a way that is beyond obligation, we're lacking something in our lives. We're not, we're not tzaddikim, we're not righteous. And we are being able to be kind beyond what we're obliged to, giving beyond what the obligation is, what we elicit, and what we draw down into our lives and into the world is this limitless, boundless kindness of God, that all the blemishes of my soul are filled, gone. Again, the name of the book is Samarkand. Just put it into, I just put that into Facebook, so you have it there. Hillel Zaltzman, the author. Okay. Questions? Thoughts? Anybody on Clubhouse have a question? Jeffrey, you finally got the end here. What what you were looking for?
Yeah. So I was thinking, the words from Jeremiah there are certainly very inspiring and comforting and stuff. I was wondering if a slightly different take, I think, of what you're saying, how this relates to like tikkun olam. He wasn't saying incomplete. We're talking about boundless here, but it seems like it's a model of how we all kind of spiritually are trying to return from exile and to make better in the world. And you think of tikkun olam, some people think of it as money, some people think of it as service. So it's a little different what you were saying, but what do you think about that?
Well, this is the ultimate tikkun olam, right? This is the ultimate tikkun olam, and because it is bringing a godliness into this world that is beyond, the human condition. So usually tikkun olam, we think about it, about righting the wrongs that are going on in the world. The those that are poor are taken care of. Those that are lacking in any way, we are there for them. But this is, of course, taking it to the next level and bringing it in a manner of beyond the
Spiritual.
beyond the human
Spiritual.
condition.
Yeah.
It's really beyond the human condition. Again, human condition is you borrow 300 rubles to make your Passover, and you give it all away. That's Now he did it with complete trust. In the end, he didn't. You might say, well, that very foolish and very irresponsible. No, a very responsible person. He did get the monies that were necessary for the family, for his family. So it wasn't, he was being irresponsible. And sometimes we might feel that way. That you give, but you got to take care of yourself. So he took care of his family very well. Um, so this is just, Tikkun Olam on steroids. This is definitely going to fix the world, right, in a much more beautiful way and a godly way, rather than, um, just kind of doing in a way that doesn't bring out, I guess, a real godliness. This brings out a real godliness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that Tikkun Olam is the limited one, and this is we're talking about the unlimited.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, not to belittle the regular, and that's called. Remember the Zohar. We said two types of kindness. Uh, there's Chesed Olam, Chesed of the world, which is connected to Tikkun Olam, right? Fixing the world, that Chesed, because it is a limited one. In other words, everybody. I mean, could you just imagine if every one of us that are learning right now, we did what we're obliged to do when it comes to tzedakah, to charity, and to acts of loving kindness. If we did what we were obliged to do, whoa, things would be very, very different. You know, uh, I know here in Quebec, um, I think the average Quebecois um, gives from their tax return, because based on their tax return, perhaps they give more than, I would imagine they give more than that. But what they're claiming for tax benefit, because when you give charity, you get a tax receipt that you can get a tax benefit for that. Um, but if I recall correctly, the average person is giving like $300 a year. $300 a year. Uh, uh, you know, That's like, what do you mean? How's that? That's not even 1% of net earnings. That's not even 1% of net earnings. Forget about 10%, which is minimum. So imagine if all of us, um, you know, were giving what we're obliged to give. Whoa, things would be very different. The world would be a much kinder place. So, and here what the Alter Rebbe is saying, that there's another level. Okay, so that other level is is something at least that we should appreciate it, know that it's out there, and maybe we're not holding by that at the moment, which is understandable. That we're going to give in that limitless, beyond our obligation, but just our awareness of that, and that there are some people like that, is quite amazing. Quite amazing. Yeah. Any other questions? I don't see questions on Facebook. At least I don't see question marks before. If there's anybody that has a question, didn't put a question mark before, I'm not seeing it. So please either repost it with two question marks first, so that I can easily see it. Anybody else has something to share on Clubhouse? All right. Oh, what? Carl. Well, okay, Carl. Looking forward. Oh, Davida, is not giving to charity one of the worst sins? Since Sodom was destroyed because they didn't let anyone to give charity, and what they did to the young girl who gave money to a beggar. Doesn't charity also? Yes, absolutely correct what you're saying, Davida. It's you know God when it came to the building the Tower of Babel, um, and dispersing all the people, that God did not destroy them, even though they wanted to fight God. But the flood, God destroyed them. Why did he destroy that generation of the flood? And he didn't destroy the Tower of Babel. He didn't destroy them because in the story of the flood, Noah's flood, people didn't get along, didn't care for each other. Robbed, stole, killed from each other. But Tower of Babel, they were fighting God, but they got along between each other. They got along between each other, cared for each other. So ultimately, that we care for each other, even if we don't recognize God, that's a value. That's a value. Now, of course, recognizing God and being prompted by that is even a greater value and a greater um, a light that we bring into the world, that we emulate God. Now, no question about that. But that being said, um, even caring, giving, and we just give because we're compassionate, we care, and maybe it has nothing to do with God, obligation to God, obligation or beyond obligation or anything that of that nature, that has value. That has great value. Jane, does limitless giving have the same meaning with the statement "give until it hurts"? Yeah, probably. I mean, that's a form of limitless giving. That when you are giving beyond what you're comfortable. Absolutely. Good point, Jane. Good point. Yep. All right. All right, folks. Wonderful. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody. Reminder: Rambam at 12:45. And we will see you on Sunday with actually some heavy-duty learning. Um, letter number 11 is extremely powerful. Okay, I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful day and a good Shabbos. Be well.